Hello, everyone. We will get started here in just a minute while we get everyone in. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. This is the Garden Hour with MU Extension. My name is Gwen Funk. I am the field specialist in horticulture, and I'm in Northwest Missouri. So we have lots to talk with you today to you today. So we are glad that you are here and hope that everything goes well. Let me get things rolling. Okay, here we go. This is our map of our horticulture specialists that are scattered around the state. We do have some new folks with us. So we have Eliza that is over here in Jefferson County. And then I apologize, but I can't, we have a new person that's down here. And is this Matt, I think?
Yeah, so Matt Hutchison is
Yeah.
down in the southwestern part of the state. He's actually housed in Jasper County.
Here.
And then Eliza is our new hort specialist, and she's in St. Louis County.
St. Louis County, right. So I
Yeah,
apologize, I didn't have it quite straightened out in my head yet, but so we are glad to have them on board, and they are both on the meeting today. So hopefully you get to know them a little bit and know that they are there to help you out with lots of things. You can kind of see where you live on this map, and feel free to reach out to any of the hort specialists that are listed there. But really, again, we kind of work as a big team, and we'll take any questions from anywhere and refer them to who knows the best answer. So feel free to do that. We are live streaming this on YouTube, so that is another place that you can see the Garden Hour, and those recordings are also archived, so you can go back and watch previous episodes. And then we also have snippets that from the Garden Hour that they're just the little portions of the programming that we have available for you that are subject specific. So those are things that you can go back and look at if you need to. So with that, I will stop sharing, and we do have Zack with us today, who is going to tell us about our windy weather that we have going on here. Zack?
Yeah, thanks, Gwen, and hello, everyone, and welcome to spring. Since the last time we were together, we were talking about all the winter weather in February, but now we've quickly transitioned into what's been kind of a wild start to at least meteorological spring, which we consider March 1st as the start. So now that we can look back at not just February, but the whole winter, we can see how it'll go down for Missouri in the record books here. So of course, it should come up no surprise that February did come in colder than average, just over 1.5 degrees. It was a cold February, and we had snowfall along with that as well. But what you might not have realized is that the precipitation was a little bit below average for February, which we also saw in January. And so it was an interesting end to winter where it was very active, and we had lots of storms, but they were very cold and brought snowfall and not as much of that liquid precipitation. So we have been a little bit dry coming out of the winter here. But overall, even though we were cold in January and February, December and winter started out very warm and actually snow-free. So if we average all these months together, really our average winter temperature of 32.3 comes in right at our statewide average pretty much. So even though it was our coldest winter since 2021, or 2020 through 2021, excuse me, and snowier for a lot of us, temperatures were really above average. But we did see also, if we put all 3 months together, December, January, and February, slightly drier winter as far as total precipitation. But now I'll pull up our snowfall map, and it should come as no surprise that for most of us, except for basically counties along the Iowa border, it was a snowier than average winter. Nothing record breaking, but if we look here in the top left, everybody in yellow here received 8 to 12 inches at least, and that's most of the state. But we look at the highest totals along the I-70 corridor, up to 24 to 30 inches of snow. So a good snow year on the bottom. This is compared to our normal snowfall. And so these greens show areas where we were above average. And so cold and colder than it's been of recent memory and snowier, but a little bit on the dry side for winter. But as we've gotten into March, it's like the weather changed with the seasons and new to change because we've quickly been warmer and have started to see some of that springtime severe weather, which is common during the spring in Missouri here. So I did want to note the Friday, March 14th severe weather outbreak we saw last Friday here. And so you can see these are reports of either thunderstorm damaging winds in blue, hail and green, and unfortunately tornadoes with those red dots concentrated around St. Louis and southeastern Missouri, and unfortunately some of the fatalities with that severe weather as well. But even if you weren't along, and you can kind of see some of the storm tracks where we had the tornadoes and most damage, it was just an extreme weather day in general on Friday here. And so these are some of the peak wind gusts across the state. And of course, some stations like here, the Jefferson City Airport and Cape Girardeau, had thunderstorms and so caught those, 73 to 78 mile per hour gusts. But even the rest of the state, we were getting winds here 40 to 60 miles per hour outside of those thunderstorms as well. That was combined with ahead of those thunderstorms, really dry weather for the couple days ahead. And so these are Friday's lowest minimum relative humidity. And so on a stormy day, we actually had, relative humidity down to 13% here near Kansas City, but in the teens to 20s for most of the state, which is really dry. And so we did see with that, if you get those weather alerts on your phone or on the radio, we've had a lot of days like that with very windy conditions. I know we were talking before the garden hour. It's been unusually windy, but also with some of the drier weather we've been primed for those fire risk days when we see those red flag warnings and we want to avoid burning. But it's been almost constant here. It feels like the past 2 weeks. This is just the number of red flag warnings for each county over the past 10 days. And we can see places like Joplin have had 5 separate red flag warnings, but most of us have had 3 or 4 with fewer in eastern Missouri and are under those today. So really been a March with a lot of wind, which has caused this increase in fire risk. And the other underlying feature, as we talked about some of that winter precipitation, as we're getting into March and starting to warm up, we do have these areas across the state, particularly pretty much from maybe Springfield north up to northeast Missouri, that corridor that's a little bit drier than average for this time of year. And so this is the U.S. Drought Monitor, where we do see some abnormally dry and drought conditions. And over the past 30 days, that's really what we've seen here. So combining the first half of March with the end of April, continue to be dry, but especially in southeast Missouri, some of these areas only seeing about 25% of normal rainfall. Now, yesterday, before we got up to seeing some of the colder temperatures today as the winds shift, we saw a very warm air mass and another one of those fire weather days. I did want to note some of the high temperatures we saw across the state. Places like Columbia, St. Louis, Jefferson City, St. Charles, all setting some daily high temperature records. So lower to mid 85 degrees Fahrenheit at the St. Charles airport there. So we continue to see some of those red flag warning types of days there. And so now that we look at March with about 20 days in the books here, it should come of no surprise that we're looking at a warmer than average March by about 5 to 8 degrees. And so that'll be a warmer than average start to spring. But just like January and February, most of us have seen rainfall as we see on the map on the right, but you're still seeing deficits of around an inch in St. Louis, Springfield, up to an inch and a half so far for March in Cape Girardeau. So even though it's been active, we're not getting as much moisture during March. And so today, if you've gone outside, it's very windy. It is an active weather day for most of the central US. And so in Missouri, we've got those red flag warnings in pink up again. You see the wind advisories in brown and some high wind warnings. And that's basically because if we look on our right here, there's an area of low pressure parked right over Missouri. And so that's why we've seen these very high winds. A blizzard unfolding to our northwest, but mostly dry for the state, actually, as a cold front comes through, is going to really chill temperatures this afternoon. I did want to show this. I know a lot of us across the state might have noticed some haze across the state this morning. And so if you look here, this is our area of low pressure, and it looks very similar if we just look at our satellite image here. And so air is rotating counterclockwise around this area of low pressure. And where you see this brown here that's different from the white in the clouds, that's actually dust in the atmosphere. And so there's actually been some very large dust storms across Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. And this storm's been large enough to pick up some of that dust and transport it through the atmosphere. And so could definitely see some hazy skies and also maybe a little bit of brown raindrops, especially as they dry on a car or window, you might notice from that dust. But nothing is as bad as to our south and west. This was yesterday evening, and you can see those winds picked up that dust, and overnight, some of it made it all the way to Missouri. So kind of unusual, something we don't see here every day, but an explanation for that haze. Now, looking ahead here, unfortunately, our pattern of seeing rainfall but being a little bit on the dry side looks to continue. So this is our precipitation forecast over the next 7 days for rainfall totals. And a good rule of thumb for spring is that we usually receive about 3/4 of an inch per week. And so we look here, and most of the rainfall over a 1/2 inch, where you see blue is going to be in southern Missouri, but maybe in Columbia only about 1/4 of an inch. So could be another dry week for a lot of us. Looking at the 8 to 14 day to really wrap up March and get into April, warm temperatures look to continue here. So high probabilities of warmer than average temperatures to end the month, but overall not much confidence in the precip forecast here, kind of trending towards normal, maybe a little bit wetter off to our east. So with this warm up, I did want to show here, I know this time of year, we're all really thinking about, well, when's going to be that last frost? And if you're a gardener, when do you want to get outside, plant, or really just get in the garden and start to work here? So we do look warmer, and we're getting into the time of year when on average, we're approaching our last spring frost. And so these maps here are a part of an IPM through MU extension frost freeze guide that's available online. But on the left is really on average, just looking at our temperature data, when our last hard freeze is. So here's spring of 28 degrees Fahrenheit. And the boot heel, it's possible that based on the average, we might have seen that last spring frost. But for most of us, especially across central Missouri here, it's really that first week of April, just looking at average temperatures when we can see that last spring hard freeze. Now for that last kind of patchy light frost, so here's 36 degrees Fahrenheit, basically you can push everything back another 3 weeks. And so the boot heel, that first 2 weeks of April, you can on average not expect any more frost, but for a lot of, again, mid-Missouri and central Missouri, that last week of April is on average when we can see that frost. And finally, I'll leave you here. This is a spring forecast for March, April, May, but not much change expected here. So equal chances for kind of normal temperatures. And what we see here is a similar pattern to what's been recent, where eastern Missouri getting a little bit more precip, but some of the central and western parts of the state being drier. So with that, I'll leave you all here, and hopefully this time next month we're well above those frost dates and able to start talking about planting with confidence. So thank you all.
Hey, Zach, I have a question for you. I every so often will post out on a bunch of different Facebook pages the drought map, and I've had people come back with comments saying, we can't be in a drought. I'm walking across my grass and it's so soggy. So, how would you explain that to someone? What does that drought map truly, really mean if people walk out and go, hey, my grass is wet?
Yeah, that's a great question, Debbie, because I live here in Columbia and we're abnormally dry. And yes, even after a few days of the rain, my lawn's still soggy too. And so really that goes to even if you may be in drought because of precipitation deficits, like we've been dry from a rainfall perspective, drought does look different for based on the time of year. So if it were summer and we saw these dry conditions, you would expect your lawn to start to brown up. But typically from a climate perspective, it's our wet time of year here in March, April, and May. So we expect soggy soils and wet conditions. So even though we're a little drier, it's just drier from a seasonal wet time of year. So, but as we get later in the growing season, this becomes more important because if you're dry when it's July and August, you see more impacts there.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
All right, thank you for all that information. I had to laugh. My sister lives down in Lubbock, Texas, so I thanked her this morning for all the dust she was sending my way. So it was kind of funny that you mentioned that. So I wanted to take a few minutes here to introduce a couple of our new hort specialists. And so I'm going to ask Eliza if she would just kind of say a few words here and tell us about herself and what she can provide for you.
Hi, all. My name is Eliza Pessereau. I don't know if we're seeing the full slide right now. Right now, it looks like I'm seeing speaker view.
Let's see. I think Traven is sharing that. So if you could maybe try display settings, you might be able to switch it in there. I don't know. No. Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
That's perfect.
That looks good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Eliza Pessereau. I'm a new field specialist in horticulture, and I'm in St. Louis City and County. You were sort of right, Gwen. I do. Since we don't currently have someone covering Jefferson County, I will on occasion do work in Jefferson County as well. So for anyone on the call who's in Jefferson, you're welcome to contact me if you have gardening or farming questions as well. I am actually mostly splitting the urban east region of the St. Louis metro area with Eli Isley, who's already been here for a while. So I'm primarily taking St. Louis City and County, and he's taking St. Charles County. My master's is in entomology and agroecology, and I did that at University of Wisconsin in Madison. I've got a photo up here of my master's research. I was doing research on flowering cover crops and their benefits for native and wild pollinators. So we've got this cover crop is called Camelina sativa. It's a brassica, and it's really great overwintering cover crop we were looking at that can flower really early in the spring, right when there aren't very many flowering crops or native plants out there. So that was some work I did in my master's. I'm interested in doing more work on native pollinators and integrated pest management in this role. And then obviously I have experience with cover crops. I'm originally from Napa, California. So if you have grape or wine questions, I can direct them to my dad, who works in the wine industry. Yep. So for insect questions, cover crop questions, you are welcome to come to me, and I'm excited to be working with everyone. Thank you.
Eliza, that's great. That's good to have you on board, and I look forward to tagging on to some of your expertise. So great. And next we have Matthew from the southwest corner of the state. So Matthew, you want to say a few words here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gwen. My name is Matthew Hutchman. I am stationed in the Southwest region. I was raised in Dade County in the Southwest region, which is one of the counties that I cover. I'm in Jasper County, but I also have Polk, Dade, Barton, Lawrence, Newton, McDonald, and Berry counties as well. I recently completed my master's in plant, insect, and microbial sciences at the University of Missouri. Before that, I received my bachelor's in environmental plant science from Missouri State University. My master's degree, my research during my master's focused on weed management options for American elderberry production. So American elderberry is a developing crop in the Midwest. It's fairly prominent in Southwest Missouri and across the state of Missouri, up around Columbia. I know there's a number of farms there as well. My specialties include home gardening. I also cover commercial horticulture too. I've worked with elderberry as well as strawberries too. So small fruit production is an area that I enjoy working in. So if you have any questions in either one of those areas, in home gardening or in small fruit production, really anything in the realm of horticulture, I'd be glad to field a question on. So thank you for letting me say a few words, and I look forward to hopefully getting to meet some people from the Southwest region and across the state of Missouri.
Oh, great. You guys have so much good knowledge to share with us. So I'm so glad that you guys are here and part of our team. So guests that are on our programs today, take a look at their faces, look at their names. It's good to reach out to them and ask them questions. So glad to have you. So Zack was talking about, I'm going to transition here into one of our topics today, talking about how warm our weather is, which kind of makes it ideal for planting seeds. But maybe we need to think about, we have the wind to contend with right now, but what are some of the plants that you have coming up right now? Like Jennifer, you're in the northeast part of the state. So what blooming plants are you seeing right now?
Well, not a lot. We are still a little brown, but we are greening up. So our lawns are greening up. We also have some daffodils in bloom, and Lenten roses are in bloom. And then our tulip foliage is up about 2 to 3 inches. So what do you have in bloom over in Northwest Missouri?
Yeah, over here we're still quite brown. I'm starting to see the surprise lilies poking up through the ground, and my tulip leaves are poking up. The maple trees have been just in full bloom, which is causing my nose to run a lot. So a lot of our early blooming trees are getting lots of pollination right now with all of the wind that's going on. I would say maybe in town where there's some hot pockets, they're probably seeing a few blooms, but I'm not seeing that overwhelmingly everywhere yet. So we're still kind of on the breaking edge of that so far. Traven, you're down in the southeast part. What do you see going on down there?
I'm seeing some of our forsythia, our yellow shrubs, I have a couple planted by the office, so they're starting to bloom out, really beautiful pop of yellow. A lot of our other trees and natives are starting to bloom and show their white flowers. So it's warming up, but I'm afraid we're going to get a little bit more of a cold snap coming in. So have to refer back to Zack on that one.
Right. So if you're gardening, if you're wanting to plant maybe some garden seeds right now, I think Jennifer's presented some things or has prepared a few guides for us or has some pointers for us that can give us some ideas on what we need to plant. Jennifer, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there are some vegetables that you can start planting in your garden. And last weekend, I planted some spinach in containers. And I know that there's a lot of gardeners that are ready to get out there and they're asking, what can I plant now? Well, here's a list of things that you can start planting. And we actually recommend that you get these planted by around April 10th, because these are cool season vegetables. And if you wait until the warmer days of spring, let's say you wait until late April into May, these plants aren't going to grow very well, may not be productive. So that's why we actually want to get out and start planting them. So you can start planting your leafy greens, your lettuce, spinach, kale, collards. Those are all things that can be direct seeded. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi are cole crops that can be planted now by transplants. If you were going to start them by seed, they should have been started probably the end of January, early February. I started some broccoli on January 31st, and it's already several inches tall. So at this point, if you're going to plant these, you're going to want to plant transplants. Also, radishes, carrots can be planted direct seeded. And then onions, potatoes, peas, or other cool season vegetables that can be planted. And our garden centers have the seeds in, they have the transplants in. So they're ready for gardeners to come purchase plants. And there are some flowers that we can plant now. So for those that are interested in planting flowers, maybe you want some color, you'd like to add some color to your beds or borders, or maybe even containers. Maybe you have a container by your front door and you'd like to add some color. Pansies are the flower of choice. So if you hit up those farm stores and garden centers, you'll see a lot of pansies that are available for purchase as transplants in 4-packs. Also, snapdragons and dianthus, also known as pinks or sweet William, are cold or cool season flowers. They tolerate cooler weather. Now, my snapdragons will go through the summer just fine, do well, but these 3 plants tend to do very well when the weather is cooler. And pansies will even grow, or you'll see them popped up through a light snow. Regarding trees and shrubs, if you want to plant some fruit trees, you can start doing that now. Also ornamental trees, ornamental shrubs. The garden centers are getting those in. The farm stores are getting them in. So now is the time to start planting them. Now through usually April is an ideal time. Also, fruit plants. If this is the year you want to put in some grapevines or you want to start a new strawberry bed, you can start purchasing those plants and getting ready to plant. So grapevines, strawberries, your brambles like blackberries, raspberries, your blueberry plants, gooseberries, currants. Those are all fruit plants that can be planted in early spring.
Okay.
And then if you thought, well, I want to plant some native plants or some native perennials or even non-native perennials, now's the time where you can also plant them. So hit up your garden centers, local nurseries, see what they have in stock, and start getting ready to plant these. There are some things. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so what if I didn't get my broccoli plants started early enough, so I'm going to have to buy transplants. So what are some tips on getting those things into the ground? Are there some special techniques that I need to be aware of?
So yeah, okay, so let's say I just went through this list of things that you can plant now. And I did mention that if you did not start your cole crops like your broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower by seed back in January, you are going to have to buy transplants. And some of the things that you want to kind of do ahead is know your site requirements. So know the requirements of the plants and know the site requirements. So most of our plants, particularly our vegetable plants and our fruit plants, need full sun. So we want a full sun location. We want good drainage. We want to prepare our soil. That might mean taking a soil test, adding amendments, and never go and add a lot of amendments without first doing a soil test, because you may be adding things that your soil does not need, and you can actually make the soil worse. So just know your site requirements and know what the plant requires. And then, start preparing that planting site. I talked about purchasing your plants. I like to go to the local nurseries, local garden centers, a family-owned one, see what they have, support them. And then, I prepared my site. I'm going to plant them in the ground. And then comes the maintaining. After you get everything planted, whether it be a tree or a flower or the vegetable plants, you have to maintain them. This will require watering, mulching. With vegetables, I like to use straw mulch. With woody plants, I like to use a bark mulch. So know your different kinds of mulches, know your watering requirements for plants. On a warm, windy day, they're going to need more water. The soil's going to dry out. And then weed management is really important. So make sure you are keeping up on weeds in your raised beds or the actual garden. And with trees and shrubs, make sure you're keeping the weeds away from the trees throughout the summer. And that's just a few of the tips that I would recommend for planting this time of the year.
Okay, great. I know it's a kind of a busy season for folks who want to get the garden going. Traven, and I forgot to mention that if you have any questions, get them into the chat. And then also you can ask them directly to ask questions here, and Traven is monitoring that. So have there been any questions, or do you guys, all the guests that are here, do you have any questions or other observations maybe that you want to add to the discussion?
Well, Miss Peggy says her magnolias are in full bloom in Colombia, daffodils also, and she just mentioned she also planted her lettuce and chives. So that's super exciting to get some of this early stuff in the ground.
Is very nice. So Jennifer, you mentioned native plants, and I know sometimes they have specialized seed techniques that they have to go through to get the seeds to germinate. So Traven is going to talk a little bit about cold stratification of seeds. So if you're interested in native plants, which I heard a little podcast this morning on my drive talking about how having natives in your garden can be a dual purpose garden. It's not just for beautification, but it can also serve an ecological role too. So sometimes having those natives in your garden is a twofold win. So Traven's going to talk a little bit about how to prepare those seeds so that they germinate well for you. And Traven, it looks like you're muted, and it looks like you're in presenter view again. So.
Uh-oh. There we go. Are we seeing it?
Yes, now we are.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. So gotta love all the controls here. All right. So this I definitely want to say good afternoon. And again, thanks for joining us for Garden Hour. Your participation means so much to us. But I'm coming to you from Butler County Extension in Poplar Bluff. So today we're going to look at cold stratifications, and my main focus is going to be on our native seeds. Some of us gardeners aren't a fan of this cold weather as we're transitioning from this winter to spring, but actually a lot of our native species benefit from these conditions, and it helps them overcome our seed dormancy. So this seed dormancy is caused by physical, chemical, or actually both types of barriers. So these seed dormancy really helps keep these seeds from germinating until we get those perfect conditions for those seedling survival. So really briefly, I'm going to go over the process of scarification. So this involves wounding the seed, and it's usually used to overcome that dormancy. You may see this on some of the seeds may have a thick or waxy seed coat, and we can do a couple different methods that kind of mimic things in nature, like rubbing or these freezing thawing cycles. So in one case, we can use sandpaper, a file, or even nail clippers. The whole point is to physically remove a portion or nick or injure that seed coat so we can then get our water to imbibe in the seed. And also, some of our species with really thick or hard seed coats actually need to go through a hot water bath or even sulfuric acid to scarify that seed. So, so next, I'm going to focus on stratification. So stratification, we're just exposing that seed to cool and moist conditions. So think about nature, what that seed is going to go through in nature. These conditions really mimic what happens with the cold and freezing thawing cycles we have. This helps actually break down our chemicals called dormants. So these dormants are these dormant chemicals actually is what keeps these seeds from germinating. So there's all kinds of different methods for cold stratification. It can just be with cold itself. It may need to have a combination of cold and moist conditions. We can also have presence or absence of light. So all these conditions can kind of come together and be combined to to help overcome these germinations of these seeds. So as a general rule, about 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 months is sufficient to start these seeds. If you do have any questions, you should be able to find this information on the back of the seed pack, and it'll tell you the ideas. So cold stratification, to cold stratify, we want to place these seeds in a container. It's really helpful to put the date, the name, and the treatment dates of when it's going into the cold and when it's going to be coming out. So the best place to do this is really your refrigerator, or if you have another cold environment. So you can stick them away for 1 to 4 months, depending on the species. And the hardest part for me is to set a reminder. Sometimes things, I do this all the time at my house, and sometimes things and seeds get lost in the fridge. So smartphones are great to keep a reminder of when you're supposed to take those out and germinate them. So moist stratification is another method. Not all seeds may require this, but really the big difference is we're, instead of just keeping the seeds, the dry seeds in the container, we're just adding a moist potting mix. The key here is to keep that moisture or that potting mix moist, but not soaking wet, and to check on it every once in a while to make sure it doesn't dry out. So that's kind of more of a technical method and more controlled method to stratify your seeds. Another method, a little bit easier, I would say, is you could actually sow these seeds outdoors in a bed or tray, or you can also use recycled milk jugs and sow these natives in the early fall or winter, and just let nature do its course. And that's going to achieve those same results. We have a really good publication on winter sowing seeds. It is a youth activity, but I know a couple gardeners, it's a really easy way to start our seeds, and it's really fun activity. So we'll throw that down, that link down in the chat here in a minute. So this next slide is a list of some Missouri native species that are going to benefit from that 2 to 3 months of cold stratification. Going from left to right, we have a lot of our anemone species. This one's a rue anemone. There are also several native aster species, like the New England aster here in Missouri. We also have tick-seed coreopsis, echinacea, and our purple cone flowers, another popular native. Liatris, this variety is blazing star. And last is Lobina. So these are some, I tried to pick some of the native species that you may be familiar with. Kind of continuation. We also have Rudbeckia species, the coneflower, the lean or the royal catchfly. I see the royal catchflies along the riverbanks near my house. So they're really, really pretty. Solidago or goldenrod. And last but not least, our verbena or rose verbena here in Missouri. So my last slide that I want to talk about is our some of our natives that are in the legume family. So touching on these actually need a combination of both scarification and moist or cool stratification to really get the most out of and be most effective for their germination rate. So these legumes have a really hard seed coat. Sometimes we may have to nick those or sand or even do a boiling water method to get them to germinate. So a couple species you might be familiar with is Baptista, and also as seen in this top picture with those light purple and bluish blooms. And another one is Circe canadensis or rosebud or eastern redbud. I'm sorry, excuse me. So today's focus was really on some of those native species that require our cold stratification. But if you want a more in-depth guide, we can find this from a publication from Missouri Botanical Garden, native seed propagation methods. And here in a minute, I will drop that link down in the chat so you can read more into it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Traven. interesting information there, and I always like hearing about trying to incorporate the native plants back into our landscape. I would like to know, just in general, like just to the participants here in the meeting today, what are some of the natives that you are interested in? You can drop those maybe in the chat. Have you had good success with some natives? Are there any new natives that you want to try to add? And maybe even the specialists that are on here, we might just have a little conversation with this. I know the master gardeners up here in Northwest Missouri, they used the milk jug method for winter sowing to start some butterfly weed, different species of butterfly weed, and they're having great success with that. So they're good with that. Have any of you had any other experiences with some of the natives in your area? Jennifer, yeah, Jennifer, do you have any that you're wanting to try out that's new?
Well, no, but I will say I absolutely love asters. That's one of my favorite native plants. I love the butterflies and all the insects they attract in the fall. So I actually look forward to late August when my asters start blooming, because I know that I'm going to have a lot of monarch butterflies and bees and just a lot of pollinators all around my house, as well as the extension office, because of all those asters. So that's one of my favorites, particularly the New England aster.
Yeah, I read on grownative.org that goldenrod will support like 112 different kinds of pollinators. And that is, to me, phenomenal. Just that, that one plant. So that's pretty cool. So Traven, thank you for that. And thanks for starting the conversation on native plants and getting that kind of in our vocabulary as we move forward in some of our horticulture projects. Debbie, what about weeds? What about weed control in our lawns? I'm starting to get a lot of questions about, how to make my lawn look really good this year. So what do you have for suggestions on that?
So one of the first questions that, we get into our office, the most common question when it comes to about lawn care is, how do I take care of my weeds? That's the most common question that we get in our office. And I'm sure it's the same across all the other folks that are on with extension, is how do I manage the weeds in my lawn? So there are a couple of different ways, and most of the folks really don't want to use chemicals, which is perfectly fine. But there are some best management practices that you can use. And so we'll talk just real quickly about some of these different things. So what do I do with the weeds? So we have some weeds here on this picture. So really, to be honest with you, if you know what the weeds are, chances are they have an indication of what's happening below ground. So if we look at the dandelions here, the dandelions, as we all know, have a taproot, and anything that has a taproot has a tendency to move and push that soil around, at least underground a little bit with that taproot. So dandelions are there. The purpose is there's something going on in the soil, but they are really used to break up compacted soil. Sorry, people. And then the clovers that we have in the bottom left side, the white clover or any of the kind of clovers, they're a legume. And so what happens with the legumes is that they fix nitrogen into the soil. So that is an indication that your soil is lacking nitrogen. So those are some of the things that you can think about. I know that if you have moss in your lawn, it's an indication that it's probably a shady area. And what happens with that is then we also know that the soil is probably a little acidic on the acidic side. We also know that it's compacted soil. If you've got wild violets in your yard, chances are that's also going to be in a shady area. They really like it where there's a little bit more of a deeper type of a shade. And if it's a deeper shade, we might have a hard time growing some of the different types of turf cultivars and that are out there. And so you may want to think about what else could you do besides having wonderful grass underneath that shade tree. So think about those kinds of things and what does that weed actually indicate? And no, I'm not sure what this weed does indicate, and I don't know what that one is. I do have a book. I'd have to look those up. So weed management. So weeds can tell you kind of what's going on with your lawn. We also need to identify the weeds because we need to know what their life cycle is. Are they an annual weed? Are they a biennial weed? Or are they a perennial weed? And so we need to know what those are for when we might be able to try to control them in some fashion, if we're going to, especially if we're going to be using chemicals of some sort. We also need to understand that we have weeds that are going to be grass-like, and we have broadleaf weeds that are going to be out there. And then we have that category all by itself that's called nutsedge. And that actually has its own very particular type of an herbicide that you're going to use if you're going to try to control the nutsedge. Nutsedge also has a tendency to be in areas that have a little bit more moisture in the soil or can retain more moisture than other areas. So those are things to think about in identifying those weeds. So what are the best control measures for our weeds? Is if we want to go back to the basics, the things that we really need to think about is to use good cultural practices. That is the best way to try to control the weeds in your lawn. So you have to start out from the very, very beginning in using good cultural practices. So what does that mean? It means you need make sure that you mow your grass at the appropriate height. So here we can see on the big picture, this side over here, they mow it at a height of 1.5 inches for a cool season lawn. And it's cool season lawn identical. It's the same exact turf at 3.5 inches tall. And the black circles are indicating where those weeds are. So you have fewer weeds when you mow high. You have more weeds when you mow close. So when you mow close, you'll notice that there's not as many blades or leaf structure above the soil line. So for a weed seed to blow in, it doesn't have as much of those blades or the forest of the turf, as I like to call it, to penetrate down in to get into that soil. Whereas on the left side where you mow high, there's more leaf blades there. It has a harder time for those weed seeds to get down to the soil to have that impact so that it can actually start to grow and sprout. And then the upper right picture, it just indicates also another good reason why to mow tall. And we're talking about the cool season grasses, is that if you mow it shorter, the root system is going to be shorter. If you mow it taller, the root system is more prolific underground. What that means then is that those roots are going to go a little bit deeper down into the soil, spread out a little bit further. Notice as it spreads, some of the turf varieties will actually grow and actually start producing new blades from that root system. Here, the root system is not strong enough to produce and actually have them come back up above ground to produce more blades. So those are things to think about. Also, if the soil is going to be dry, and we talk about drought and irrigation of our turf, think about that if you water it well, those roots are going to grow deeper. If they don't grow deep, they're going to be at the top level. And so therefore, those roots are going to dry out much quicker. So you're causing stress to the plant to start with. So steps to effective weed management is properly identify the weed, practice good management where you can have the best possible lawn that you can to prevent the weeds from actually coming. Plant the appropriate type of grass based on the location. Is it sunny? Is it part shade? Do you prefer the warm season or the cool season turf? Correct mowing practices, as I just discussed. Reseeding your bare areas in the fall. And then, of course, do proper fertilization and watering. So what we're finding is that with our soil test results coming in, the folks that are doing fertilization, they get the test results back and they might be too high or too low in either the pH or in the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that's out there. So you really want to only fertilize according to what the needs are in the soil. A lot of folks will just do the same type of fertilizing with the same 1, 2, 3 numbers, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium numbers, year after year after year. And our plants may not need as much as what you're putting on. And so what's happening then is you're spending money for fertilizer that you may not need, but you also, if the fertilization isn't staying in the soil, it goes down into our watershed. So it's essentially washing out of your soil. And so those are things that we need to think about as well when we're looking at our fertilization. So properly identify, decide what type of method and control that you want to use. Did I go forward in my slide set? Okay, there. So again, looking at the annuals, if it's a summer annual for a grass or broadleaf, control is to mow high. Make sure you have good density. Reseed your lawn in the fall. You can reseed it in early spring, late winter. You can use pre-emergent herbicides and post-emergent herbicides. If you use pre-emergent herbicides, it means essentially what's happening is that herbicide is going to prevent that seed from sprouting, from rooting, and from sprouting. So if you're overseeding your lawn and putting down the pre-emergent herbicides, that pre-emergent herbicide is going to prevent your seed, turf seed, from actually sprouting as well. Post-emergent means that the weed is already up and growing, and it's going to go ahead and try to control that weed. Check the bags on the herbicides to make sure that you know if it's pre-emergent or post-emergent, as well as knowing if it's going to control the type of weeds that you have. So the biennials, if you have a weed there vegetatively the first year, it goes to seed or flower the second year. If it's a broadleaf herbicide, is most effective in that first year, and apply it prior to its flowering in the second year if it's a biennial. If it's a perennial, it means it lives for more than 2 years. If it's a grass, you can use a non-selective herbicides. There are only a few selective herbicides that actually are out on the market. If it's a broadleaf, it can be applied in early fall or it can be applied in spring, 30 to 40 days after the spring growth begins. So know what type of weed that you have is important. So here is a perennial grassy weed issue. Can anyone indicate or tell me what type of weed this might have been, or what is the cause of what's actually happening here? If someone could, Gwen or Traven, have, if there were any comments, what do you think is actually happening with the weed situation here? Any suggestions?
I had one suggestion of a fungus.
Actually, this person, what he did or she did, went out and bought Roundup that had glyphosate in it. Not all Roundups nowadays have glyphosate. So they took the glyphosate, which is a systemic herbicide, that it kills whatever it touches. It's non-selective. And so they went out and they sprayed a weed. Well, there probably was a little bit of wind. They probably were too high above the weed to try to kill it. So they actually are killing their turf as well as the weed. So be very careful when you're trying to utilize different types of herbicides. Make sure you use the correct herbicide with the method and control of the individual weed you're trying to take care of. For broadleaf, we have summer annuals and winter annuals. And again, the summer annuals are going to start to sprout in late winter. During the summer time frame, they're coming up, so they're starting to sprout right now. The seeds are. The winter annuals, such as henbit is the most common one. They actually sprout their seeds in late fall. They go dormant during the winter, and then they start popping up. So know what type of weed it is again, and select the appropriate type of herbicide should you decide to go ahead and use an herbicide method. For perennial weeds, and I meant to take off the specific types of herbicides, I apologize for that. But I just wanted you to know there are specific herbicides that you can use on the broadleaf perennials. And that's all that I really have at this moment. So I'm sure I saw things popping up in the chat box. So what is there?
All right, one of the question was moles took over my lawn, Bermuda grass, and it says I've been mowing it short the last 2 years. I don't like Bermuda grass, but it's what I've got. Should I really mow it to 3.5 inches high?
Okay, so this is Debbie's opinion, and I'll let my colleagues also take note or make their comment as well when it comes to Bermuda grass. And I know Dr. Dave Trinklein, if he's still on, might want to make a comment. If it is and I had this, I had neighbors when I lived in Hillsborough. I tried to maintain my lawn to make it look really nice. My neighbors didn't really care that much. They had lots of weeds. They mowed it really short. And then all of a sudden, Bermuda grass came in. Bermuda grass, in my opinion, is a war that I will never win. As much as you try to maintain the Bermuda grass, if your neighbors have it in their yard, you will never win that war just because of the way that particular weed grows. Now, in the southern part of the US, Bermuda grass is a turf grass. And as we start to get a little bit warmer over time, that Bermuda grass is going to continue to creep northward, just like some of our insects are. So I don't know. Do some of my colleagues have a comment about that before I go into
Dave
goals?
Trinklein here.
Yes, Dave.
We in Missouri are in the transition zone turf-wise, meaning we're a little bit too far south for cool season grasses to be very happy, and maybe a bit too far north for some of the warm season. But nonetheless, there is progress that is being made for warm season grasses that are more cold tolerant. And I think a lot of people are looking now at maybe there is virtue in Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, and so forth. They tend to be less disease prone, more drought tolerant. The only caveat is they don't remain green during the winter, and it takes a bit of time for them to become green in the spring. But the choice of a species to put in the lawn is a very, very difficult choice and should be largely dependent on local conditions. And I say that Bermuda grass is not the enemy that it used to be. If we use some of the named cultivars, many of them came out of Oklahoma State, and as such, of course, they're a bit further south than we are, but still are winter hardy, at least to central Missouri.
Thanks, Dave. And
Sure.
and Dave is really right. We are in that transition zone. And to me in particular, it was not a war. It's not a battle I was willing to go after. As long as my turf would look green in the summer, I was going to be happy. And that's how I looked at that. When it comes to moles, they're in mating season. So they're very active in late winter and very early spring. And so that's probably why you see a bunch of moles that are moving around in your yard right now. Moles actually eat worms. They do not eat grubs. And so that's a misconception by a lot of folks. And if you go to a lot of the different stores, you may see grub control, or you may see mole control, and you'll see white grubs on it. It's because they're catering to, in my opinion, the folks that may not know what grubs actually are eating. So if you've got lots of nice worms, chances are they might be moving into your yard. But of course, we want those worms. Probably the best thing to do, there are some baits that are out there that are effective, and doing trapping. Trapping is also good. If you know, and right now might be a good time, if you have a bunch of mole hills, chances are that's where the litter is staying. Digging up those molehills will actually help to remove some of that litter, the babies, as well as trying to disrupt that particular area within that mole trail. Moles can actually, I think they can go. Oh, I shouldn't have even brought this up. I can't remember. I taught the lawn class last week to Jennifer's master gardeners. Jennifer, do you remember how fast I said moles could dig? They dig.
I don't remember exactly, but I remember you saying it's quite a distance.
It is quite a distance.
Quite a
They
distance,
could
yeah.
do like within 10 minutes, they're like, or 3 minutes, I don't remember which, they're like, numerous feet down the ways in your yard. So they really dig very fast.
Or maybe
Um,
like 3 feet within so many minutes could that
yeah,
have been it?
something
3
like
feet?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, someone is saying Google says 18 feet per hour. So, they go really, really fast. They sleep for 2 hours and they're alive and feeding for 2 hours. They sleep two, they're on two. So 24 hours a day. So if you can figure out when they're running through their runs or moving through their runs, then you've got a time when they're active, come back in about a little over 2 hours and try to set some traps there.
Can I add a quick word, Debbie?
Of course.
A lot of people will use poison baits for moles. Be very, very careful with the active ingredient. So-called poison peanuts, and yes, moles are carnivores. I don't know why they go after the peanuts, often contain strychnine, which is not good stuff to have in your yard if you have pets, certainly children or so forth. There is a very effective mole bait called taliprid. It's
Yes.
actually sold in structures that look like worms. So the mole is not only confused by there's a poison there, but it's confused that it's a food source for it. And I understand that this is very effective in mole control if you're not averse to poisoning them.
And that is correct because do check if you're going to look at any of those baits that are out there. Be sure to read the label. It is a pesticide, and so the label is going to be the law. So make sure that you read that label. I know it in the class last week with Jennifer, there were some folks that were interested and had made comment that they read the labels, and the labels actually said that it could be harmful to pets. So just be aware of that. I'm just going to drop the name into the chat box just so that you can see what that name is. So thank you. Sorry for all the questions. We may not get to all of them.
Yeah, right. We probably need to wrap up. We're a little bit after 1. I wanted to ask Karen if I know she has a question about Star of Bethlehem. You might want to reach out to your local horticulture specialist or email one of us with your email address and contact information so that we can address that question. And then Peggy, I see you had a question about the mushrooms in your lawn. We again just reach out to your local hort specialist or to one of us, and that'll be great. I want to thank Scott and Dave for contributing their information in the chat as well. So we really do appreciate your participation, and we are so glad that you were here and you took the time to join us today and provide some input. And hopefully you can walk away from this garden hour with at least one little tidbit that you can put to use and make your gardens a little bit better and healthier. So with that, our next garden hour will be April 16th, again, noon to 1. And then you have the website here that will show you where you can drop some questions, and that kind of helps us plan for our topics that we have each month. So we do like having those questions come in. And then just as a reminder real quick here, if you want to save the chat, you can go to the 3 little dots that are at the top and drop down, and it will save the chat for you or give you the option to save that. And then lastly, again, just a reminder of where your hort specialists are. And don't forget, we have Matt down here and we have Eliza over here. So feel free to reach out to us. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great day, but hold on to your hats when you go outside. Take care. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.